Hey guys, Stealth here. Welcome to Wargame. Today we're following the Wild Host in a total destruction game that's going to last up to 50 minutes. Now, the Wild Host wrote to me as the description of this replay that this is his first multiplayer game. So I gotta say that is a brave thing to do. If you've only played AI so far, so you only played skirmish, and then you're switching to human opponents, then you're in for a bit of a surprise. And it's usually not a good one, as human opponents just apply various and extremely different tactics from what you're used to against the AI. AI just spam stuff. They just throw quad stacks of you at you all day. The AI just does not do that. Sorry, other players don't do that. They just keep going, they keep pushing, and they use units intelligently. Well, most of them. Unless I'm playing ranked, in which case that rule doesn't apply. Anyway, we're going to help host through my commentary and your comments down below to make himself a better player. His plan of attack currently is to go to golf, and right there is your first mistake. If you want to be aggressive in this game, and even if it isn't conquest but just destruction, you want to capture strategic points. This in itself is an okay overwatch point, but only as a fallback position. This will work once the other positions have been compromised. So always make this your ultimate goal, and this is your fallback plan. If your infantry gets overwhelmed here, if there's too many units suppressing fire, then you can always try and pull back along this axis, along the road, and go in towards these structures. Park a few ATGMs there, and it's going to be a bit difficult for the enemy opponents, or for the enemies, to push up here with tanks, fire support vehicles, AA, and whatever they decide to bring up the ridge. So make sure that this is your first objective to go. As for his force composition, don't do triple stacks. I personally am not a fan of that, because if you do use triple stacks and the enemy decides to go in with a bombing run or an artillery strike, then everything gets panicked at the same time. Whereas if you have duo stacks or single units, then yes, they're harder to manage, but they're also a bit less vulnerable. Now, I gotta say that this same thing goes for Nero, who's also using quite a few quad stacks, but I'm gonna be focusing on the Wild Host today. He's also using a Tunguska. He has a Niwa SC for long-range anti-plane warfare, and we're about to see a couple of further support units spawn right over here. A couple of Wilks, a Ural with a reconnaissance guy inside. He has 2 command vehicles on the move. Now, you don't really need 2 command vehicles. You don't really need to capture this one and the other one instantly. That's not required. If you can just capture this one and then focus on deploying as many units here as possible to hold up here while you reinforce and then potentially bring in a CV, and again, it's destruction, so it's not that necessary, then you're much safer off. Now let's check the Tunguska. If you are using the Tunguska and you want to keep it alive for the longest period of time, make sure that you disable the gun. Otherwise it can get targeted by seed aircraft, and it's a pretty expensive unit to lose at 85 points. Whereas the missile on it is still very, very good. So make sure you disable the weapon system, the Twin A38M. As for his unit choices, you can see he's holding up here, whereas Nero is pushing forward and going towards the positions that Wild Host should also be going towards. Wild Host does not have any high-end tanks, and that is something that you see increasingly more in these sorts of gameplays. It's not unusual for people to open up with one, if not multiple super heavies. You can already see one M1A2 over here, and probably a brother tank right next to it, another M1A2. M1A2s are absolute beasts in tank warfare. Wilks are decent support tanks, but don't stand a chance against the modern systems that an M1A2 can provide. Now, when he probably saw Nero push, this is when Wild Host also started pushing. But at this point it was a bit too late, and I don't think that he really had a plan for going forward with his units. So he offloads his infantry here. Now, this position is no good for infantry. The infantry that he is using, the Motorschützen, are the base variants, which don't have any good anti-tank weaponry. Meaning that should they get into range of the M1A2, if they get into range, then they're not even going to be able to do any sort of significant damage to it. as they are very, very low in the AP department. Only 14 points there. Whereas you compare that to the M1A2, I believe it has 22, 23 frontal armor. We'll check in a minute as they get re-engaged. Concours M are being put forward as anti-tank weapons, and over on the right he is suppressing a tank push or an infantry push with his Wilks as well. He also has some mortars for suppressive fire, good choice there, as then the man deploys a couple of Concours M, which are deploying a lot of ATGMs here, and suppressing most of that push. Now, next thing is that you always want to make sure your units are in cover. Now we're going to see a warfare or a slugfest between the M1A2 and the Motorschützen. Correction, actually it's going for the Wilk. That was one round from the M1A2. And to check, it has 22 frontal armor. Take 2 shots and you screw off a Wilk. At this point, we not only have problems with insufficient units, but also an insufficient type of unit. We don't have recon. The Ural with the reconnaissance group inside, and by the looks of it, I'm not exactly sure, but I think they're going to be Rezitkas. They should be on the front line. They don't particularly need to fire, but they need to be on the front line to spot stuff and have a look at exactly what is out there so that you can exactly start to match that with either tanks of your own, anti-tank weaponry, anti-air if you're seeing helicopters coming in. You need to be able to see what's going on. I was using the special Aufkleider. Okay. Now with 2 M1A2s pushing along the middle line, a Husker is going to be pushing on him very, very quickly. At this point, there is very little to do, but try to get the hell out of there. The M1A2 clearly has enough recon support to suppress all the infantry here. I probably would even try to make it towards these buildings, as not only one M1A2 is over there firing at you, but you also have a couple of Magach 7s, which are again suppressing fire. So at this point he doesn't have the right amount of units. He's holding in the tree line, which for now is a good choice, because now they're not actually taking fire. The enemy of course does know where they are, and you can at this stage pretty much write off the infantry. They are not going to be surviving here, because either the tanks are going to push, you're going to see an airstrike come in, you're going to see an artillery strike hit this position and wipe out the infantry. So you can pretty much write them off. Alternatively, if you really want to push, you could use the mortars and set up a smoke wall towards this structure. Try to get one of those stacks in there, and with them in there you have at least a little bit of a roadblock in case any enemy infantry decides to push up. We already got Bedouins coming in, as well as another couple of... Dorban LRs, that's anti-tank weapons right there. And apparently the Bedouins were capable of spotting the BRDM-2 Concours and took it out. Now he's pushing, or he's pulling back. He's bringing in some new units. We got an OT-62A, BMP-1 SP-1. These, by the way, are decent units. However, they don't have an autocannon. They got the Grom, which does do some damage against infantry, but just does not quite have the range. So make sure you switch the infantry into a vehicle that has an autocannon. The autocannon has a way higher suppression rate, meaning that your infantry is going to have a far better day in order to deal with enemy infantry. And you can also take out some of the lighter support vehicles from the enemy team. Now Motorschützen have made it to safety. They're making their way back to these structures, and with it you have your fallback position. Again though, there's not a lot of recon around, if any. The only recon, or the only optics, is being provided by the units that are really not designed to do that. Motorschützen, BTR-70s that are also parked out in the open. We got the Concours M, which do have the range, but with the inclination here in the terrain it's going to be really difficult to get a couple of ATGMs out on long range. And even if they do try to get them out on long range, they don't have the spotters. So always try to get some reconnaissance units close. And in a situation like this, where you need recon pretty much right away, you can opt for a recon helicopter and have it circle over here. Just tell it to hover here. It won't dip behind the tree line because it's on top of a forest. And with it you have at least some optics and going on, or understanding of what's going on the middle of the map. Now left side of the map is operated by Nero. and he seems to be doing okay. The blue team, however, is at 1285 points, and they are already 500 points ahead. It's not going to be easy to pull that back. I mean, it's perfectly possible, but it's going to take a lot of work. Anyway, let's speed this up so we can have a look at what the TheWildHost is going to do next. If you're looking at this gameplay and going, oh my god, that is absolutely cringy, maybe, but this is how we all started. When I started Wargame against the AI even, I got killed off by an easy because I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. So switching to multiplayer is just a scary prospect, especially if you're going up against people who have played this game for hours and hours on end and who know exactly what they're doing. So, is it cringy? Probably. For experienced players, you're probably shaking your head looking at this guy going, what the hell is he doing? But he is doing it. He is at least not sticking to single player and not doing anything. So, the TheWildHost, don't be dissuaded. It is not an easy game to get into. Now, here's another issue to some extent. He's pushing along the left-turn flank with just Motorschützen. He doesn't have any fire support, he doesn't have any tanks, he doesn't have any vehicle support. If you want to push along these trees, you gotta make sure you have either overwhelming numbers, really high-end infantry, or enough fire support. OT-62As with machine guns don't really classify as fire support. And with the Motorschützen at 15 points and these guys at 5 points, they're pretty spammable, but they don't have any high-end anti-tank weaponry. So try to mix those along with the Motorschützen. So say you have some Motorschützen and some Motorschützen 90. Motorschützen 90 will take care of any heavier vehicles that the Motorschützen may not be able to counter. Whereas the Motorschützen themselves are there for mainly dealing with other infantry. And surely they're not going to be extremely successful at it, but they can at least put up a bit of a fight. Now, spreading yourself out over Gregory and Boris is pretty risky, because it means that you're going to be distracted by two flanks at once. If at all possible, try to go with one flank. Try to focus your efforts around this area and make your plan here. Because the way that I look at it is that if you're operating on one flank, you're basically a flank expert. You know exactly what is going on here because you've been paying attention to the units that not only you, your allies, and the enemy are pushing forward, but you also know pretty much where they are. So that if you switch to the other flank, you're no longer gaining that intel on this end, so you're losing your expert status on one flank, and you're just trying to scramble over to the other side. Whereas you have absolutely no idea what the enemy is deployed, you don't know what you need to counter them, and it's going to be really difficult to get a couple of good kills on there. And sure, people, especially the more experienced players, can absolutely do this. I know some who are very, very good at fighting on multiple flanks, but it is not easy. Because you're constantly going to be switching towards, oh, what is that tank doing? Where is it gone? I see a smoke screen here. Reconnaissance. Yeah, we have recon. AA. Yeah, we got it. Left flank. And it just drives you nuts, especially if you're just getting into multiplayer. So focus on one flank, even if the other flank starts to falter. I mean, they do have a fallback position here, so it's moderately survivable to just focus on this flank for now. Now with their spawn zones, they have Fedor, Anna and Boris, meaning that they have a decent amount of income. I'm not exactly sure what the level of income was here, but it is probably so that at this stage he has quite a few points in the bank, if not a few hundreds. If you are going to turtle up here, that is a playstyle that you can employ, but make sure that you have some fire supports, you have some tanks, you have some, well, he has the mortars. So you could argue that he has fire support covered. But what he does not have here is tanks. If a couple of those Makar 7s with, I believe it's 5 of them, come up along this ridgeline, they all fire once or twice at the Concourse end, and you have no further anti-tank weapon here. Because the Concourse is already spotted and already taking fire. So make sure that you park something along the lines of a 120 to 150 point tank right here. If anything does come up, then you even have a potential flank shot on them, as they might be showing their flank along here and there. So you can quickly penetrate the tank and take it out of action. As for the rest, the mortars are doing a pretty good job, but you really don't have a lot of reconnaissance here. One group of special Aufklärer on this end are decent for spotting, but you don't really know what they're pushing towards the middle, and they could come up this ridgeline, which means that, sure, they're open to a lot of attack, but if they really wanted to and they push a couple of tanks in, then you're going to be quite surprised and left without any kind of defenses. So that's why I recommend putting a reconnaissance helicopter forward here, even if it is just for a small dash, and just having a look at what the enemy has, quickly pulling it back once you know, and then bringing in the units that you need to counter that. Now, MiG-29M is coming in. Very, very dangerous play from Dan the Man. He's probably expecting that M1A2 to still be there. And surprisingly, he did hit something. What exactly did he hit? He actually did hit an M1A2. That is rather surprising. I thought Husker would have moved that thing out of the way by now. But he almost got him as well. Anyway, Nero surrenders. That transfers all of Nero's units to Dan the Man. Meaning that Dan the Man suddenly has his hands full. And Dan is saying, look for scouts here. So there might already be reconnaissance units, but I don't really see them. As we're looking at the neutral screen, just note how little they really have in this zone. Blue 4 is perfectly happy keeping them out of this zone, but nothing really further. They have some rangers, they have just 2 Bedouins here out of the 5 that you can have. They think that there's AA here, but it's actually it is AA, sorry, I was looking at the Dorban. So they have AA infantry, they have the Dorbans, which are out of ammo. They got 4 now Magar 7s on standby, a couple of Hafiz and Mehbet. So they got a pretty solid position here, but if these tanks would be moving up here, then that position would be even furtherly or even more difficult to breach. So he actually does not have any kind of good opportunity to push into this sector without taking significant losses. And if this was conquest, then you could say, well, I'll take the losses, I'll eat them, just in order to gain the terrain, because I'm losing points. In destruction, you don't really have that, because you cannot afford to take that many risks with your forces, as you are not exactly in a position where you can lose points. Points is what it's all about. You need to make sure that you have these points and you don't waste them. Now, the Motorschützen, they were not blinking for quite a while, and this is what I call blinking. You see that the unit icon, it's just fading in and out. Same for these guys. That means they're in cover. If you see a unit that is supposed to be in cover, such as this one, and suddenly stops blinking, that's when you have a problem, because that's when the unit is getting detected. And a unit that's getting detected, you can virtually always assume that it's going to take fire within the next, let's say, next 30 seconds, depending on what type of weapon system the enemy is using against them. So if anything is not blinking, then you have to make sure that you start moving it back to where it starts blinking again. Otherwise, you're very quickly going to find your unit disappearing into a fireball, usually. SU-25T comes in. It does a gun run. So Dan the Man unfortunately sacrificed an anti-tank plane there, leading me to believe that Dan the Man is also a newer player. So this is just as much for him as for WildHost. Make sure you have reconnaissance on a position that you want to strike. Don't just send airplanes to their death like that. They're there to support. They're not there as a sheerly offensive weapon that you can just send forward and hope to get a couple of low point kills. Because, and this is what's known as trading, if you are going to engage another unit, you always want to try and trade up. And by this I mean that if, for example, you engage a tank with Concours M, and you kill the tank, which is worth 100 points, but you lose both Concours, then you lost 50 points and the enemy lost 100 points. So you traded up for 50 points. If you're going for a couple of low point infantry units, this was the Darkan AA unit, and you're sacrificing a 200 point plane to do that versus a potential 30 point or 40 point victory, then you're always going to go 160 points in the red, which in destruction, and it actually applies as well for conquest, is not a trade you want to make. Always try to trade up. Now then the man is trying to do what he can. He's looking at a couple of Zaghlams which are pushing forward. We've got Miluim, we've got a Cassiope which is providing fire support the moment they can spot something. And I believe that, yeah, here we go. Reinforcements are coming in. Once again, at a range this short, you want to have autocannons. The Grom, 228 Grom, is just not that good. And especially if you, for example, take a position along this ridgeline, you can have a bit of fire support along this axis as well as some here. And potentially, depending on the range of your autocannon, or maybe if you have a tank here, you can even suppress anything that comes out of this tree line, which is moving onto yours. The Grom just cannot do that. So make sure you switch those to autocannons. And we're going to have a look at his deck a bit later, because I believe he did send that along as well. Over on the right, we have then the man pushing forward with BMP-3s. He's immediately taking AT fire from the Dorban LRs. And once again does not have reconnaissance mixed in here. Meaning that he does not know what's going on. And pushing forward is very, very risky. As this BMP-3 is already taking fire from potentially the Magach 7s, which are, I think, a hold up right here. Yep, there we go. Towards the left, they have lost their command infantry, or their command vehicle. They're pushing forward, getting some kills. But here's the thing, which is another issue with these. Autocannons you can more or less reliably fire on the move. This one has an accuracy of 5%, meaning that, or a stabilizer of 5% I should say, meaning that if you are firing it on the move, you're not actually going to hit anything. You have a 1 in 20% or 1 in 20 chance that you're going to hit something. Miluim's pushing forward, Motorschützen pushing back, but at this point everyone's taking artillery fire and this is just one big infantry brawl. The Groms are doing an okay job. Wilks are supporting as well, but Wilks are a bit too far back. This is a knife fight, and you could argue that the Wilks in a situation like this are not really the right unit to use, as you have cheaper units that can do the same job, such as the T-72M. You don't need a T-72M1. The cheaper your tank is for fire support, so long as it has that 4 HE power gun, the more units you can actually buy with the remaining points. Because whereas he's now spending 85 points on one Wilk, he could be spending 50-55 points on a T-72M1 and get 2, potentially 3 infantry squads. Now, all sorts of artillery is coming in. Then the man's pushing another couple of airplanes forward, which, by the way, are not exactly the right airplanes for the job. If you want to destroy enemy infantry, then this thing can do it. But I would usually prefer something along the lines of a bomber which actually delivers a payload in the form of a couple of free-falling bombs instead of these rocket pods. They're just not good enough. Now with just one Wilk and one BMP SP1 surviving, it's not going to take long for the enemy team to overwhelm them here. On the right flank, then the man's pushing forward. And once again, because of his total lack of recon, the enemy is a very, very easy time just wiping out whatever he has left. And if you come up against one of these bastards, it's going to be even more difficult. Fortunately, they cannot actually engage Motostrelki because they don't have an HE vector, they only have AP. Now, I'm wondering how many points the TheWildHost has in reserve at this point. I think it's going to be at least 100 and probably more. So with that, if you see that you have this many units losing, you could further turtle up. That would be my strategy, because it is destruction, and if they don't want to be sitting still for the next 26 minutes, then they're going to have to come at you, which is always a better position. It's always safer, and it's always easier to defend against an enemy aggressor than try to push back at him. Now the enemy's pushing forward with a very expensive tank, 2A4, virtually unsupported by the looks of it, and it almost went down, probably due to the motor chutes and the Wilk and the SP1 that was firing at it, but it was just pulled out at the last possible second. His Niwa is out here as well. I don't think it has fired a missile yet, but make sure that if possible you hotkey this unit, so select it, in my case I usually press Ctrl 5 to make sure that it is bound to 5 for quick access, and then you press H, which turns the weapons off. Otherwise, this thing can and will get targeted by a seed aircraft, like one of those. And you can see that the enemy has deployed a couple of helicopters along this flank. Let's see if these are transports or just recons. Yep, one reconnaissance, and a couple of empty transports, making sure that a push along this vector is very difficult. And over here they have the tier N5s, which will spot anything that might come over the other flank. Similarly, they have one special Aufklärer here. If the enemy really wanted to, they could fly around, drop off infantry here or here, and just start encroaching towards your spawn zone, killing off your command vehicle, and that's pretty much good game and you're done. The right flank, they do have a bit more defenses. They have a Shilka there, they have a Tunguska here. I believe they used to have a Shilka on this end, but that might be this one by now. And they do have these, but again, if the enemy really wanted to, they could fly around the edge of the map with a couple of helicopters, come into the side and kill off Fedor. Now, it's just 4 minutes left. He's bringing in more mortars. Mortars is not what you need right now. Mortars are nice secondary line support units, not primary line attackers. And what you need right now are primary units. You need guns, you need boots on the ground, you need infantry. Just trying to get control over these zones, trying to hold them for now. Because I mean, pushing is absolutely out of the question, but you can at least hold on for a bit. And this, unfortunately, is what happens when you don't deactivate your radar. Now, I don't blame him. It's something that takes practice. Over here he's disabled both weapons, which is a bit too much. You don't need to disable both. One of them is enough. Just disable the twin A38, or yeah, twin A 2A38M, and keep the missile active. Now Dan the Man has abandoned the fight, and therefore the Wild Host now has all of the units, right at a time when Jorge here is going to push with all of those Gemels. So we got quite a few tanks coming in. What I haven't really seen... yep, there it is. That's an AA unit, but it's just one. If you see a push coming in of Israeli tanks, and you see that it's just one unit, then what you can do to counter that is bring in a seed aircraft, if you still have it. The seed aircraft will take out the Mehbet. With a bit of luck, it is going to be active. And then you push back with a couple of attack helicopters, quickly wiping out the tanks and making sure that this push is not going to pull through. And especially these guys are nice and expensive, 80-point units a piece. And if you can just hit those once with an ATGM, even rocket pods in significant numbers will kill them off. That's 160 points right there. The Gemels themselves, that's 100 points a piece. They're not terribly heavily armored, so they can pretty easily be taken out as well. And that's not the only problem we have, as Jorge is also pushing forward with more Miluim right into Special Aufklärer, which is currently not engaged yet, but that's about to change, as the Miluim are going to swarm this guy, and they just don't have any options there. Pram S once again firing at the last known location of those tanks, which of course is not their current location. And he loses the CV in Gregory, interestingly, so we have potential infantry over here. Yep, we have Rangers, and here is the M1A2 that's been haunting us all game, especially early on. You can see that once again the Rangers spotting the Ural, M1A2 just delivering the firepower needed to kill anything and everything that gets in its way. BMP3 tries to hit them, does get a hit, barely any damage. And at this point the game is just over. So, let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on his gameplay. What could he improve? What could he work with? Comments like, I don't even know where to begin, or, oh my god, I don't want this guy on my team, are not welcome here. It's just going to be helpful comments. That's all I'm looking for, guys. Anyway, let's have a look at his deck. See what kind of units he has in there, and what can he improve upon that. Now, this is his deck, and as you may have noticed, I skipped over the results screen. It wasn't pretty. It was just not pretty. So we're not even going to go there. We're going to go directly to the deck review. For the deck, logistics, he has Command Infantry and an MI-17, looks good. Command UAZ, looking okay. 813 and a FOB. It's a very general, well-rounded situation. You don't really need anything too heavy. It does depend on your playstyle, however. If you're going with the attitude of, I really want to get into this zone, I want to hold it, then Command Infantry might not be the right choice. You could go for a T-72 command tank. The thing is then that you're going to have to sacrifice either this card, which is going to give you numbers for command vehicles, or this one, which is going to give you flexibility because it's a helicopter. There's no real right or wrong choice here, it's just individual preference. I would just stick with this because it gives you a lot of flexibility. Infantry. We have the Motorschützen 90 and the BMP-2C. See, this is a nice combination. They have an autocannon, they do have an autocannon, the 2A42, they have the Concourse, which you don't really need. You could just go for the BMP-2, which saves you 5 points. So let's switch that out. He has 8 LSTRs. Now the LSTRs are once again two different ways of deploying here. I know that there's a couple of different transports, but you could go for the mentality of, I'm going to do a quick land grab, and I'm going to send them in Mi-24Ds, which are very, very quick, pushing up fast, deep into enemy territory, or into a position where you want to have units right away, such as that initial position that I marked. Then you can use these guys in the Mi-24D. If you want to use them as supporting forces, or just guys who are going to kick down the door fast, then a transport is more effective, but they are not as flexible or as mobile as the helicopters, of course. So I would recommend taking these guys in the Mi-24D. And sure, you only get 6 of them, but you also get some really good helicopters, in the sense that they are very good at supporting the LSTRs at medium operations against infantry and vehicles. Now we have too many Motorschützen in here at the moment. We have 28 Motorschützen all in the BMP SP1. We're going to change that up a bit. I don't mind having Motorschützen, but I want to have those in virtually the cheapest option that I have, which is a 30 point, and yes, this is 30 points as well, but I don't really like the Grom. Alternatively, yeah, you're going for 35 points already. That's pretty expensive. Other line infantry that we can use, because I'm currently looking for infantry that we can spam. You can go for the base Motorschützen. These guys are just as spammable as their counterparts, but once again they're 15 points. And the only real cheapish transport that you have is this one. That means that for 20 points you can deploy infantry and a pretty terrible support vehicle. But it does allow you to spam infantry into gaps where you need them. Finally, he doesn't have any high-end infantry that can deal with enemy infantry effectively. Commandos can do that, and you would be well off with the Commandosis. Commandosi I would use in order to neutralize enemy infantry. You could alternatively go for shock infantry, which are, for example, let's see, the Motorschützen from West Germany. Correction, we already have these. Never mind. Alternatively, we have fire support units, such as these guys, Granatomet AGS-17. They have a grenade launcher. At short to medium range, they're going to be pretty effective against enemy infantry, but they die very, very quickly. If you blend them with the Motorschützen, then they can get a pretty good fire support in. If you like to have your infantry which can also deal with enemy tanks or vehicles, then go for the Panzerjäger, because they can also engage infantry. They have some HE. Considering that these are pretty spammable, I would also go with some other infantry that's pretty spammable and go with this. It's not a very advanced deck, but this will get you started. This will get you going, at least initially. And then for the Conqueror's M, we're going to switch these, of course. He has 6 of these in the OT62A. Fine combination. You don't really need to change too much there. Supports. He has the SFL 2S6, which is the Tunguska for 85 points. We have ROMs, we have the Niwa, and we got a couple of Prams. That's a pretty good combination. It really depends on your personal preference what you want to go with. I think that he has a bit too much AA, or AA in too low numbers. I would switch the Niwa to 4, allowing you a bit more versatility there. And you can afford to lose 1 or 2. Then use either this one or a cheaper version for further fire support and go for a cheaper AA unit that can back them both up. So a Strop is a very, very good unit for that. You can also use the Sopel, and considering the price tags, I'd say the Sopel is the better option here. Then you have a pretty cheap option for 45 points. Upgrading to 85 if you want to do heavy anti-helicopter warfare, and the Niwa for anti-planes. So just take 6 of these. You don't need to worry about the radar because they don't have any. You can just deploy these and they will either take out helicopters with the main gun or the Grom. Tanks then. He has very high value tanks, none of which I've seen deployed. And he doesn't have any cheap workhorse tanks, such as the T-72, T-72 Jaguar, stuff like that, is perfect in forest at short range to suppress enemy infantry. Because with 4 HE, you're going to wipe out almost half the infantry squad with one shot. So we're going to completely redesign the tank section here. I would recommend going with 2 super heavies, or 2 cards of super heavies, because they're just that good. The Twardy is a bit better, or actually is, I'd say the Twardy is more of a lighter support tank, only a little bit. 20 points frontal armor, 9 rounds a minute rate of fire is 1 higher. Its accuracy is a bit better, firing, moving and sitting still. AP is 1 point lower. The Moderna has more frontal armor, a better punch, and comes with the autocannon. So you have your super heavies, and these are always good to deploy. Last game that I covered, I believe it was Spec, who deployed 2 if not 3 Modernas right from the start. That's how good these things are. Then you're going to need something which is a bit more affordable. So something along the lines of, say, 90 points. That's where the T-72 M1M comes in handy. It has a good gun. It has a nice amount of frontal armor. It has a long-range ATGM, which does 22 AP, which for a 90-point tank is pretty good. And 7 of these will do. And then we're going to add the T-72 Standard. These things are nothing special. They are fantastic workhorse tanks. They don't have a lot of armor, it's just 11, meaning that they can still engage other lower-priced tanks if they want to. Rate of fire isn't fantastic, but with their 4 HE they're mainly there to engage enemy infantry, and 1 or 2 hits will wipe out the infantry squad altogether. So I would take 12 of these. Reconnaissance. Specialny Jetnotki. These are in the OT-64C. We have them in the Mi-17. That's a bit too much reconnaissance infantry, and it depends on what role you want to give them. If you're going for an Eastern Bloc general deck like this is, I always prefer to have the Specialny Jetnotki in combination with, where are they at? The Formosa. Formosa are fantastic anti-infantry forces. That grenade launcher, the Palad M, is very, very good at suppressing enemy infantry and killing them off very quickly. So make sure you have a few of these in your deck. And as for transports, just go for the Scott 2A or the Scott 2, depending on how much accuracy you want. The weapon on this one is a bit better, so let's go for this one. These, in combination, can take out tanks and infantry very quickly. Just make sure they don't take any artillery fire, because they're likely to die very quickly. Cheap spammable infantry, the special Aufklärer. We have the Snezkas for additional scouting purposes. Go with 12, because you can also deploy these as cheap reconnaissance / fire support vehicles. And then he has the Mi-2, which is an okay recon helicopter. I personally think it's a bit slow for a recon helo, but it is nice and cheap. It is only 40 points, and with that you can quickly buy one if you need recon anywhere. Vehicles, he has the Pram S. It's a concourse. It has a 5 HE 120mm gun. I just don't use these too often myself. They're okay, but there are other interesting choices. If you want to have a vehicle that can back up infantry quickly, then go with this one. It has 2 HE, it has 5 frontal armor, meaning that it can usually sustain 1 hit from infantry before it's going to go into the red zones as far as hit points. It's cheap, 20 points only, very spammable. If you mix these in with your Motorschützen and your Panzerjäger, then it's going to be pretty damn difficult for the enemy infantry to survive for any longer period of time. Other option, TO-55, Napalm Tank. They are very selective units in the sense that they are very situational. But if you need to put up a flame wall, then this thing is your absolute go-to weapon. For this deck, to be a bit more beginner friendly, I would recommend these guys. Just take 12 of them, and if you do run out, then either reconsider your playstyle or switch to 16. Helos. We got the DHS Mi-24P, which is the AA version of it. And yes, I know it also carries the anti-tank weapon, but I mainly consider it AA. And we have the S-24. Nothing I would change there. Looks good. Finally, for aircraft, we have the Seria 30, very good anti-tank plane. The MiG-29 913S for air superiority fighter. 2 Seed aircraft. And finally 2 MiG-912As for napalm bombs. I'd say that this situation looks good. You have your anti-infantry, you have your anti-tank, you have your anti-airplane and anti-radar sources. And in combination you can pretty much engage anything that you like with that. If you do like to have a bit more flexibility, or you want to engage a larger area, then you could consider switching out the MiG-29 for something along the lines of a dedicated bomber. And let's see... this one comes to mind, the MiG-25 RBF. It has 8 500 kilogram bombs. It is more of a carpet bomber, but it doesn't have that unique napalm double roll that the 912 has. I usually prefer the 912 because of that napalm ability. You can quickly wipe out infantry. This one is just a larger blanket bomber that will damage everything that happens to get in the way. And that's the deck that I would recommend. A few small changes here and there, and let me know how it works for you, WildHost. Try it out. The deck code is in the description down below, so you can use it. Adjust it as you see fit. Adjust it as you gain more experience with these units, and you find units that you do like, units that you don't like. And be sure to, if you're just a regular viewer, leave a comment on either the deck or the gameplay. What does he need to know? What does he need to improve? And how would you recommend that he does it? Comments such as those can only help him and other newer players get better at the game. So that if you do get them as a teammate, then it's going to be a bit more of a pleasant experience. If you are a newer player and you want to experience or you want to play with some more experienced guys, then you're always welcome on my TeamSpeak. We have a Wargame community going there. You're free to join. There's no special admission anything, so log on to the TeamSpeak, poke one of the moderators for moving privileges, and just try and find a game with like-minded people, because we're all here to help you. And with that, it's the end of the video. So thank you for watching. I hope you were able to give some advice to WildHost, and if you have a replay of your own that you would like to send in, the link to that is in the description down below, as per the usual. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you soon for more videos.